one of the big problems in the world right now is people think they're in different stories. People are in one story and they say the other people are in some other story, and their story doesn't count, their lives don't count, and their way of being doesn't matter, and all that kind of thing. The divisiveness in the world separating people more and more. And then one thing to understand is we are in the story of everything becoming divided. That's the story we are in. And so there's many versions of that in mythology, and I want to summarize one that's one of my favorites, but it's also very brief, and it has this wisdom in it that's done or presented in a very brief pattern. And some of you will know it because I tell it often, because it gets to the root of the matter quickly. And so this is a story from Native American traditions. It's told by a number of tribes in North America, and it involves a cave. And there's different versions, but the stories basically say there's a cave in which is all the knowledge that we're seeking, all the knowledge that we need. And they say if you found that cave, if you looked into it, what you would see is an old woman sitting in the cave weaving a beautiful garment, and she's been weaving it for a long time. And she's about to finish the trim of this beautiful garment, and she wants it to be unique and special, and so she's weaving the trim with porcupine quills. And in order to weave them, she has to bite down and flatten them, and she's been biting down on porcupine quills for so long, she has worn her teeth down to nothing but nubs above the gums. But still, she keeps biting on the quills and flattening them. And as she does so, it occurs every once in a while that she has to go to the back of the cave, because at the back of the cave, there's a fire. Some people say it's the most ancient thing in the world. And hanging over the fire, there's a cauldron. And in the cauldron, there are all the seeds of all the trees and all the bushes and all the plants and all the grains and all the flowers. And if the stew of seeds that are in the cauldron are not stirred every once in a while, they will burn. And if those seeds burn, then there won't be any more forests or any more bushes or grains or flowers. And so the old woman puts down this beautiful garment, the most beautiful garment anyone has ever seen, and she lays it down on the floor of the cave, and she goes to the back of the cave to stir the stew of seeds. And while she's going back, she moves slowly. She's been working so hard for so long. She moves slowly as she goes. And as she's doing that, the black dog, the black dog comes over to the beautiful garment where it lays on the floor of the cave, and it sees a loose thread, and it can't help it. The black dog begins to tug on the thread, and the dog tugs on the thread until the entire beautiful garment has been unraveled and is now laying in a chaotic mess on the floor. And when the old woman comes back and she sees all of her creative work turned into chaos laying on the floor, she just stands still for a moment. And maybe in our way of thinking, maybe she stands in a depth of overwhelm. The story doesn't say, but after a while, the old woman sits down. And when she sits down, she herself sees a loose thread, and she picks up the thread. And as soon as she touches the thread, she gets a new vision of an even more beautiful garment. And once she gets that, she begins to weave again, just as she's been doing before. But now she's weaving a new version of the garment, a new imagination of what can be woven out of the threads of life. And this is the story told by the elders when the world becomes overwhelming. And some people might say, damn that black dog. If it wasn't for the dog, the old woman would have finished the garment. It would have been perfect. And they forget that the word perfect means finished and done. Through the form is what it means. And therefore, perfection is a kind of death. If the old woman were to finish the garment, it would all die, because the old woman is the old woman who's weaving the world. And so the elders say when they tell the story, tolerate the chaos, tolerate whatever it is that unravels life and overwhelms your life, because we are here not simply to have balance or have an even road or simply survive. We are here to see the thread that is beckoning to us if we can find the thread that's calling to us and pick that thread up, then something alights inside our own psyche. Some switch is flipped and we begin to see the way we're supposed to see the world. And when that happens, we begin to perceive our own way of living, our own destiny, you could say. And then all that we have to do, no matter the conditions of the world, is hold on to that thread and learn how to weave that thread of imagination, that thread of genius, that thread of creation back into the world. That's what the old people say when they're telling the story, and they tell the story when everyone is feeling overwhelmed. So there's the little story. Of course, it's a little story with many things in it, and I want to refer to some of those things, but I also want to say this. When we listen to a story, the story comes to find us in a certain way, and a detail that strikes us in the story, the idea is not to understand the whole story. The idea is to be struck by a detail. That detail will connect, like the thread of the old woman, to something in us, and it can help awaken in our own imagination. And it doesn't always happen right away. It can happen later when we fall asleep at night. And then that thread from the cave of knowledge begins to work its way into our dreams. I'm just suggesting that allow the story to give you a thread and trust whatever detail intrigued you. In the bigger picture, just to say how this works, this is a story about how the whole world unravels and falls apart into chaos and then begins to be woven back into a beautiful garment again. And it also suggests we are in the position of the old woman. It's very easy, given all the statements about overwhelm that we've already shared, to realize we are in the place of witnessing the chaos. We're witnessing not just the collapse of institutions, but also the unraveling of ecosystems. That's very similar to what's happening to the old woman, who's the one weaving the world. And so the idea in the story is that there's three big movements. One is creation. The story begins with her weaving the garment of creation. She's a goddess of creation. She's a creator, but in this case, a feminine one because of the weaving. So she's close to Sophia or many of the other feminine deities that were part of creation that also often have sympathy for the individual human as well. And so it begins with creation, and then creation is followed by destruction, in this case, engineered by the black dog. But the black dog represents chaos itself. And the third part of creation is the stirring and the sustaining of life. And so the story also says you can't be doing creation all the time. You have to stop sometimes in order to sustain your own life. And some people live in the realm of sustaining, parts of nature or sustaining parts of culture. And everyone gets affected by the chaos, by the unraveling. Black dog visits everyone, you could say. So one thing we already started with is stating how overwhelm is happening in each of our lives. Another question that could be answered is, how do I experience the sense of unraveling, which is part of culture now, and it's part of nature as well now. And so this is a story that uses these three big energies. You can study the myths of India. I recommend it. It's fantastic. But at the core of many of their creation stories are these same three energies. And there's very elaborate, wonderful stories about it. But here's this very brief story, a kind of folk myth, something that you can stick in your pocket and carry it with you as a reminder of what the world is. And it has this important suggestion that we each are here to find our own thread, and our own thread is secretly connected to the weaving, to the garment, to the tapestry of all of creation. This is a secret about the human individual self and soul, that inside us, we are threaded into the world in a meaningful way that is connected to the old ideas of fate and destiny, and the ideas of calling, and the ideas of awakening. And that thread, in terms of all the old stories, is the uniqueness of our own soul. So I'm just saying things here because they're part of the story and they're part of perhaps the soul's response to overwhelm. Each person born is unique, never to be born again. And each person is threaded in a certain way. And learning how we are threaded, how our soul is connected to the world, is one of the few ways of finding ways and practices and methods to survive in a time of overwhelm, in a time of chaos, in a time of tragedy. So that's where the story comes from. And I'll repeat the idea. It's told by the elders. And so the elders are connected to the old woman. In many traditional cultures, the elders are close to the ancestors, and the ancestors are close to the origins, and the origins are close to the deities, and so on. And so as we get older, we're supposed to get elder, and that means more in tune with our own selves, but also more tuned in to the unseen world, to the world of creation, to the world of imagination, to the world, therefore, of healing. And so the story is having all these kind of threads and all these kinds of nuances and suggestions. But to say another thing about it is the elder is not just the older person. Everyone gets older, not everyone gets elder. The elder is someone who has awakened to the sage in their own soul, to the wisdom of their own heart. And that can happen to anyone at any age. The elders are telling the story to the youngers. The assumption is the younger people can understand it because they have the same components in themselves. They have a wisdom that's trying to awaken. They have a genius that is also trying to get their attention, and they have a sage in their own soul. And I'm saying this because of the person who said that what was overwhelming them was the young people having to face the tragedies and the disasters and the tensions of the world as they grow up. This is exactly what the elders would do, share this kind of story, and that would begin a big conversation about who each person is and how it all works, and how do you find your thread, and how do we follow the thread, and so on. And we'll keep coming back to that. So I'm just going to summarize it another way, this idea of going deep inside and finding meaning and finding purpose, because everyone is born with purpose. This is one of the old ideas. You can find it in every culture in the world, and it appears in various forms. And this is something from the Gospel of Thomas, one of the lost Gospels that then got found. And it's a familiar saying now, but it's meaningful. And you can see it in this story. If you bring forth what is within you, then what you bring forth will save you. The thread in the story. If you do not bring forth what is within you, then what you do not bring forth will destroy you. In other words, we're all under greater pressure now. We're all having to feel more extreme emotions and learn about more extreme events happening, like in climate crisis, but also happening in culture crisis. And the way we save ourselves, so to speak, is to bring forth who and what we already are at our core. And it's stated both ways. That is to say, if we bring forth what's in there, it will save us. If we don't, it will damn us, because that's the way it is here on Earth. There's not neutral ever for very long. And so eventually we have to commit to something meaningful, to something essential, to something that keeps us vital and alive. Not that we don't get afraid, not that we don't feel sorrow and feel on the edge of overwhelm, but that we have a resilience to keep coming back. And the word resilience means to go back to the essence and awaken from there. So that's the beginning of my suggestions or my stories about how we live in a time of overwhelm.